we have come to the point in your journey where we are ready to start learning to invert. And a lot of people get really scared of this, and I have to tell you, there is nothing to be scared of. If you follow along with this video today, you can't go wrong. It's important to note that there is no arbitrary time frame for being able to invert. I start to get my students to try inverting at the end of beginners, but that doesn't mean you're going to be able to do it. Some people come in and in the very first class, they are capable technically of doing an invert. They may have a dance background, a gymnastics background, they may go to the gym, they may just have a job where they're lifting heavy boxes a lot of the time, right? Other students can take years, and that doesn't mean they're not working hard, okay? For example, if you weigh more, you do have to lift more, so you have to be stronger. So by the time you're inverting, you're actually probably stronger than that skinny bitch, me, who inverted straight away. You may be much stronger. No one really takes that into account, and that is important. So we try inverting at this point in our journey, but it is not expected that you will be able to do it. And I'm going to give you things today to work towards. So even if you're like nowhere near yet, there is a lot of value by doing this class today. Let's start off with our prerequisites. So these prerequisites are a little bit arbitrary. Oh my God, I said arbitrary. I've said it so many times, it's not a real word anymore. I've had to refilm this a few times. I don't even know how it's pronounced. I've lost the will to live. But these prerequisites are not set in stone. So some people will be able to invert without them, but they are a good starting point to see whether you may feel that you're ready or not. Now, you could join in along with me and do this today, but you may then find that you're too tired to do your invert. That's okay. You can always take the information you learned today and try your invert on another day. Or if you sort of know roughly where you're at with these, you could just watch me, make a mental note, maybe make a list to test another day, and then come back and do that at a later point. So the first one, 5 knee raises on each side with a short arm position. So not arms up here or here, okay? Both arms are together at head height, and with control up and control down. Now, it doesn't mean your knees have to come super, super high. So I would probably recommend they can at least get to hip height. So you're making this right angle with your body. If you can get them to your elbows all the way up, that's even better, okay? But it's probably not necessary at this point. So we need to be able to do 5 of those. Doesn't need to be rushed. We can put our feet down in between each one, but we need to be able to do 5 on one side and then 5 on the other. So if you do want to test that now, you can pause the video and then we'll come back and look at the second one. So the second prerequisite is kneeling pull-ups. So from a kneeling position, we want to be fairly close to the pole, maybe not quite on, but not too far, just a little bit of a gap. We don't need to have the arms straight, so they're going to be slightly bent. Your tippy toes, or let's say your tippy toes, your toenails are going to stay pushed into the floor. Shoulders starting to pull down away from the ear, and we're going to lift as high as we can. We need to be able to do this, again, with control up and with control down, 5 times on each hand. Same as before with the knee raises, 5 on each side. Again, we don't have to have the arms straight. We do not need to be able to lift the feet up with us. We just need to have some level of control in our pull-up. So pause if you'd like to try that. If not, we're going to dive on to the next one. So the next one is our D sliders. If you've done any of my strength training classes, you've probably come across these. So we're going to lie on the floor with the pole in our armpit. And we do want to be quite close, so get close right in that armpit. Outside hand needs to come on top. We're going to take the outside foot onto the pole. So to do that, you may need to use your inside foot on the floor to lift the hips off the ground. So outside leg comes around the front. The other leg then lifts up, so the hips come up, and this foot crosses over the one that's there. And the foot that's already there, you want the pole in the arch of the foot, okay? Cross it over. And then what you're going to do is straighten your legs up the pole. See how they're both sickling in towards each other. And then what we're going to do, arms straight, hips as high as we can go. We're going to slide the feet down, and we're going to slide the feet up. The arms are completely straight, so we're not pulling up with our arms like a pull-up, they're completely straight. Our legs are completely straight. The movement comes from our core and our hips. So I'm like thrusting my hips to the ceiling. So we need to be comfortable doing 5 of those on each side of the pole. If we can do that, that is a really good start, and it will help us when we start to invert. Okay, next one, before we then start to get into things that we're going to need to go into more detail about, is a fan kick. Okay, so we do learn fan kick at beginner level. Your fan kick does not need to be perfect. You don't need to be getting your legs super high, but it needs to be controlled. So the pole is our armpit, essentially our knee raised position. Remember, we step on our outside leg, we hug, and we circle 1, 2. So tutorials are up for that. That will be in the prerequisites in the description. But, so you should already hopefully by this point know how to do that. The key on what I'm looking for is the ability to keep the arms in this short arm position. So as you're doing it, you're not dropping down. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is that you're not really throwing yourself with no control. Squeeze your legs, squeeze your bum, squeeze everything, squeeze your tummy, squeeze all the things. And that we're not kind of traveling forwards too much. So what we're looking for is slow and controlled, the arms staying in a nice bent position, we're not dropping down. The legs can be small, they could be tiny, but it's the control that we are looking for. So you need to be able to do that comfortably, maybe just a couple of times on each side of the pole. Now the final 2 prerequisites, we're going to go into lots more detail in this tutorial, but let me just show you them first so you've got a brief idea of what we're looking at today. So the first thing is you need to know where your legs are going to go when you go upside down. So we're going to learn this position in a moment from the floor. So when we go up, you need to understand this crucifix leg position. And then the final prerequisite is understanding how to come down safely, which is going to be to slide slowly down the pole. We're going to go into more detail about why we need to do this in the beginning in this video. But now you have an understanding of all your prerequisites. Let's dive into the first steps. The first thing we need to understand is where our legs are going to go when we get upside down. Because there's no point learning to get upside down, getting up, not knowing where our leg is going, panicking and kind of flailing and falling out of it, okay? So if we know where our legs are going to go, which we're going to do from the floor first, so a low risk way of doing it, we're going to feel way more confident when we get up into the air. So we're going to start off lying next to our pole with the pole in our armpit. Outside hand on top. Just like our D sliders, we're going to take our outside leg onto the pole, but this time, instead of it going on the foot, we're going to get it behind the heel, on the Achilles, okay? So where we've got this nice little bit behind, basically on the back of our leg. We're then going to start to hoik our hips up and bring the second leg, so the knees are pointing out and the pole is between the feet. So there's a foot on the front of the pole, and there's a foot on the back. And then we're going to shimmy our legs up. So we have one leg round the front, one round the back. They are as straight as they can go without popping off. So if I straighten them fully, they're not on the pole. So they're just bent enough. I've got my knees one either side of the pole, and my feet are crossing up the pole. So let's talk about this in terms of right or left. So this is what I would say is a right side invert. The pole is in my left armpit. My right ankle comes around the front and my knee is pointed to the right. My left leg, it's all the way around the back of the pole and it goes to the left side. My left knee points to the left and my left foot points to the right. And then bring it on the top of my left foot. I shimmy my hips up using my legs. So I thrust my hips up and I take my legs up. My right knee now is starting to point off to the left a little bit, so it starts to roll in. And my legs are as straight as I can get them. I'm squeezing from toes to thighs. One knee either side, feet crossing onto the pole. Let's look at the left side. You may need to practice this on both sides multiple times so you understand. Do not go upside down until you're 100% sure that your legs are in the correct position. So now, the pole is on my right side in my right armpit. My left hand is on top. My left leg is going to come around the front. So it's on, again, it's on the back of the leg, kind of in that Achilles heel area. So it wedges into this part here. That's my left leg. My knee points to the left, my foot is pointing to the right. I'm going to push my hips up and shimmy my legs up the pole. My right leg, the foot is pointing behind the pole to the left and the knee to the right. I'm then going to make sure I'm squeezing both knees into the pole and both feet into the pole. Remember the front leg, this leg here, it's on the back of the heel, and on the back leg, it's on the top of the foot. And I want to be as straight and as high with my hips as I can go, really squeezing. So try that on both sides a few times. Make sure you're super confident with that position, and then we'll talk the basic steps of our invert. There is a pretty controversial debate going on in the pole community all the time about stepping into an invert. Now, I'm here to say momentum is not a dirty word, okay? There is controlled momentum and there is uncontrolled momentum. And certainly there are things that we need to be looking for in terms of safety when it comes to our invert. But let me tell you this, we use momentum in pole all of the time. It's not a bad thing by itself. It's the way in which we are doing it. I believe if we expect students to wait until they can fully lift their entire body weight with control, that we are almost certainly losing people because they are going to feel fed up, frustrated. They want to be able to invert. And there are ways of doing an invert with a step that are safe. Okay, I very strongly believe this. If you were to go to an adult gymnastics class as a complete beginner, from your very first lesson, you are going to be using momentum because it requires us to use momentum. Now, it doesn't mean, I think, from your very first pole class that you should be chucking yourself into crazy positions. We have to be controlled, but we are okay to use momentum. I think it's crazy that we've got this far. It's very paternalistic. It's very fear-mongering. There are things, if we're not careful, that can cause injury, and we're going to go into that. So this first section is the basic steps, how we're going to dismount, and what we need to look out for in terms of safety. We're then going to look at some troubleshooting for our invert. So for those of you who are exhibiting kind of scary behaviors that may lead to injury, look at the troubleshooting first. It might be something very simple that fixes the problem. But if it doesn't, then you may need to do some more strengthening first. That is a realistic thing. You may need to do that. I will also provide just a couple of ways that will help you get upside down whilst you're learning without needing to properly invert. Okay, so let's just jump right in. Inverting, what are we going to do? So we want to start actually pretty close to the pole, maybe just slightly back, but we don't want to be too far. A lot of people really run into it, and that's going to give you an uncontrolled momentum. So we want to stand just slightly back from the pole at most, maybe even slightly in line with the pole. We want to have our outside hand on top, and our hands need to be around head height. You can get slightly lower, but the higher your hands are, the harder it is. So the higher the hands are, the more you have to lift yourself up to be able to get up. So make it easier for yourself. Get your hands lower than you think. Outside hand is on top. We're going to step on our inside leg, really important. The leg close to the pole is the one that is stepping forwards. If you go the other way, you will struggle to get up. So this is super, super important. Inside leg steps. We're then going to take the outside leg and swing it up to the pole. As we do that, we need to start looking back for the wall behind us. Pull through the arms, and that outside leg goes around the front. So we learnt the leg position from the floor. This is exactly the same in the air. So outside leg goes around the front, inside leg bends and goes around the back. Now here's the most important thing. We need to slide out of this. We're going to tuck our head in, look at your knees. You're going to slowly relax your grip. Importantly, don't just slide your legs, but not your hands, because you're going to fall. So your hands, your legs, everything are going to slide slowly down the pole. Keep the head tucked, keep looking at your knees. Do not release your legs until you feel the floor on your back. This is really important. I've had people think they were at the floor when they weren't. They've released their legs and they've winded themselves. You're not probably going to do any serious damage because you're close to the floor, but do make sure you feel that floor before you release your legs. Okay, let's go over that again and then we'll talk about some of the things to look for. So, outside hand is on top. We are close to the pole. Don't come out, don't go back. Stand kind of in line with the pole. Step on the inside leg is just a small step. We don't want to think about pushing forwards. I'm going to go into more detail about these things in a moment, but we don't want to push forwards. We're just going to slightly tap the foot on the floor, use that foot to push off, and as I swing my outside leg up, I'm looking back for the wall behind me. That outside leg goes around the front of the pole, and the other leg goes behind. So our legs are crossed. Get the hips up, squeeze your legs, use them to help you. If you're happy, tuck your head in, look at your knees, and remember we are sliding down the pole, hands and legs together until we feel the shoulder touch the floor. Then we can release the legs. Now, a couple of things. If you're doing this and you just get your tippy toe on, you can use your legs to hoik your hips up and bring your legs into position. That is totally fine. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people, that's how they first learn. Getting those hips up that last little bit is challenging. Okay, that does require quite a lot of strength. So use your toes. That means if you're on a standard pole, take your socks off, be barefoot, or your foot will slip off. Another thing to think about is why we have to slide down. Let's talk about that now. So when we dismount, and in fact this ties into why we need to be controlled and what we're looking for in terms of danger. So let's tie it all into one thing. If you are trying to invert and you're repeatedly falling down, every time you just keep falling out, once in a blue moon, a couple of times, not the end of the world. But if you are repeatedly falling out of this, okay, and this is the same as what would happen if you just take your legs off. You're going to just fall out of it. So it's the same situation, okay? When we come down like that, we have very little control, okay? So this is what we would call an eccentric exercise or an eccentric movement. This is like the downwards movement. These are generally harder and more intense on the body than the upward motion. Now, it will feel like it's easier because you have no control. You're not using any control, okay? And what tends to happen is we're in this kind of long lever position. So in exercise, a short lever is easier and less intense than a long lever, okay? So this would be a longer lever if I was doing a knee raise. So when we fall out of that invert, we tend to be quite straight. And at beginner level and even at more advanced levels, we don't tend to be strong enough to control that movement. So that means that nothing's really engaging. So the movement, your body is kind of taking a lot of shock. Now, what tends to happen with falling out of inverts is a few different things. There could be any injury at all in theory, but the most common I see is pulling the intercostal muscles. So these are the muscles between your ribs. If you do this, it will be very painful. It will hurt to breathe, okay? Or any kind of back injury, but quite often I'm finding that people pull the muscle or one of the muscles between the shoulder blade and the spine, but it could be any of your back muscles. So we do need to be very careful. So if we're going up and we're falling out repeatedly, we need to do a bit of troubleshooting and figure out if we can just fix our technique or whether we need to do more strength training. But on the way down, we just shouldn't be doing that. We should always be sliding down. Now, I would argue until you can start to lift up, you probably don't want to be working on controlling it down like this, okay? Because it's more intense on the body. I can feel it in myself. If I'm actually keeping the same level of control down as I'm using up, I can feel my intercostal muscles, okay, my back muscles, a lot of my core muscles working so much harder to sustain that movement. So we don't need to worry about that too much at this point, but we do need to remember until we can lift up and lift down, I say lift down, control down, we don't want to be doing anything but sliding. It is very, very important. Okay, so those are the really key things that we should be looking for. Let's quickly look at what a right side and left side invert looks like so it is super clear. So I'm going to start with the left side. The pole is on my right, my left hand is going to be on top, and both my hands are about head height. I am just sort of slightly back from my pole. I'm going to step on my right leg forward slightly as I start to swing my left leg up and I look back towards you guys. So I step right, I swing left. My left leg is round the front, my right leg is bending round the back. Both knees round the front, squeeze the legs, and you can slide the hands a little bit to create a longer shape through the body. And then remember, we are sliding down, arms and legs together. Tuck the head as you get towards the floor, and you'll land on your shoulders. Okay, right side. So the pole is on my left. My right hand is on top. Hands are about head height, close together. I'm going to step on my left leg, and my right leg is going to swing all the way up for the pole as I look back behind me. Right leg around the front, left leg around the back. Start to slide, nice and slowly, down the pole, arms and legs together. There are three main mistakes I see people making when they're learning to invert. Let's troubleshoot those first. Now, if you're still struggling after looking at these three things, and I do recommend you film yourself so you can see what you're actually doing, because it's hard when you're in the moment to know where your body is. But if you try and fix these and you're still struggling to get up, then it's almost certainly going to be a strength thing. Now, if you are a member of Practical Pole, I am here to help, you know this, so pop me a message, send me a video of what you're doing, and if there's something obvious we can tweak, then we will. If not, then it may be strength. It may be strength. So, the first one is this. Okay, so what I'm doing here, and I'm not getting up, is I'm keeping my upper body up. So the way that I see this is that we are like those football table men, right? You've got the rod through them and they're like rotating as you're playing football. Okay, we are like that. We need to rotate around our midpoint. So if our head stays up, our legs are going to come up, but our head is not going anywhere. So we're not really going to get up. If you're super bendy, you might be able to get your foot on the pole with your head still up and then get your hips up, but that's still not really ideal. So this is where we have to tip. We have to make sure our upper body goes back for our feet to come up. It's also a bit like a seesaw. If you want your head to go down and your feet have got to come up and vice versa. Okay, if you want your feet to come up, your head's got to go down. Everything has to move together. So that's where we spoke about looking back for the wall behind us. So you have to let your body start to tip back. So I step on my inside leg, my outside leg comes up, and my second leg has to follow pretty quickly behind. And as I do that, I'm going to look back and drop my upper body backwards. That's an important time to mention that if you just take one leg up and don't take the second leg with it, you're not going to go anywhere. That second leg has to get up as well, okay, or as it will pull you back down. So that's the first thing. The second issue I see a lot is dropping. So they'll invert and then they kind of drop. We've got to keep that pull in the arms. So look, watch my arms really closely. So I step, I pull, and see how I'm pulling all the way to my leg coming up. There's still a bend in my arms. My arms don't relax until my legs are on the pole. then they can straighten and relax. So the whole motion, I am pulling down. So some of this might be proprioception or coordination. It might be that you're just not realizing you're not pulling. But if you are pulling and you're still dropping down, that's a good indication that it's more of a strength thing. So working on your knee raises and being able to hold that short arm position and keep pulling and working on those pull-ups is what's going to help get you there. Now, the final thing I see is people traveling forwards, okay, and not really going anywhere. Now, this is why I actually get people to learn to invert on spin, because you can't cheat on spin. You just can't. If you move in the wrong way, you will start spinning, even if you get up. Because some people are able to still get up, even when they're not doing things in the best way. But on spin, you will know, okay? Because the pole will spin out of control. So you'll do this, and then you'll start spinning around, which we really don't want to be doing at this point. So that's a good indication of that happening. So that may come from being too far back and traveling forward into your invert. So we want to remember, we are literally, I'm like hugging the pole. I'm close to the pole. I'm in line with the pole. I step past the pole, yes, but I'm not traveling that way. I'm traveling up and over. So I need to be thinking, okay, this foot just helps to get my hips forward, but I'm not pushing off of this foot. I'm not like pushing forward and I'm not thrusting my hips. I'm thinking up. So I'm stepping and straight away I'm thinking up to the ceiling with everything that I've got, as well as tipping backwards. We don't want to be pushing off the floor to create that spin. Okay, so check those out, film yourself. See if you might be doing any of those things. If you are, try and fix them. If you can't, maybe you're just not strong enough yet, and that's okay. It takes time. Let's look at a couple of techniques to get you upside down so you can start practicing some inverted tricks, but without needing to invert. Our first technique to get us upside down without inverting uses a chair. Now, this one is harder to do when you're training alone at home, but might be good if you've got a training partner or you train in studio. So we're going to take our chair, I'm going to put it a little bit past the pole. How much is going to depend, because it depends on your limb length. But you want to be facing your chair, and it's on the same side of the pole that you are. So we're going to get, as if we're going to do an invert, we set it up, we have our outside hand on top, and we are in line with the pole. Hands are about head height, remember, not too high. I'm going to take my inside leg, so my leg closest to the pole. So this leg here, the one that's going to be able to, you could touch to the pole if you wanted to. And you're going to use that chair to push off of and reach the other leg up. Now, this doesn't always work because it depends on your flexibility. Now, you need to slide down to come down, and this is one of the issues with the chair because it might end up being in the way as you're sliding down. I have a lot of awareness, spatial awareness, and a lot of practice moving positions. So I'm able to kind of move myself away from that chair, but you may struggle to do that as a beginner. So that's why we need a training partner, because we need them to pull the chair out of the way. Otherwise, we're going to potentially hit the chair on the way down, which is not going to be fun. So, hands at head height, outside hand on top, inside leg goes onto the pole. Now, something that can help with this as well, especially if you're not as bendy, so you struggle to get your leg as high, is to bring the hands a lot lower. So I usually have them head high. You might want to bring them even down to sort of chest height. Put the weight into that leg, reach the other leg up, and shimmy the legs up the pole. Your partner would hopefully move your chair away, and then you can slide down. Save time, I'm just going to come down normally. But remember, we always slide until we can control. So that's one option. And that can allow you to get into all kinds of tricks and just be a little bit higher off of the ground. Now, the next option is to do your inverted positions from a leg hang. So the problem from a leg hook. So the problem with this is that we're going to be very close to the floor. There's still a lot we can practice there. This is also good for practicing like a Gemini and outside leg hang, because this is what we're going to use. Rather than that crucifix leg position that we've just learnt to do in our invert, we're going to use a leg hang instead. So we would stand next to the pole. So for this, you need to be able to do like side spin, maybe genie, Marley, all these kind of like leg hooky positions close to the ground. So inside leg is going to hook nice and high onto the pole. One hand goes below, one hand goes above if possible. And we are going to make sure they're both thumb up. I'm going to slide my bottom leg out behind. I'm going to slide the top hand down and then take it off. So now I am essentially in like a Gemini position, but you can see my head's already basically on the floor. But it does give me an opportunity to get used to being in that position. And from there, you could also practice hooking the legs on. This gives us just a little bit more height than putting our legs on from laying on the ground. So it gives us something to practice whilst we're getting strong enough. So at least we feel like we understand those grip points, even if we're not able to get the height. So inside leg hooks nice and high, knee up, foot down, squeeze. One hand above, one below. Thumb up. Slide the bottom leg out behind the pole. Slide the top hand down. Really squeeze this leg. Really important. Bring the hand down. And then you can, but I can just about, I'm on my head now, but I can just about do a Gemini. I've got just enough height. Now, some of that obviously relies on having enough flexibility to hook your knee really, really high. So if you're not as bendy, you may have even less height. But it still gets you upside down, and it still gets you understanding some of the leg positions you're going to use later on, and focus on using the legs a little bit more rather than the arms once you're kind of inverted. So it can still be a useful thing to practice, even if it's not perfect. But most importantly, there is no rush. There is so much we could do in pole without inverting. There's whole disciplines of pole where you barely even see people go upside down. Okay, so there's a lot to explore. There is no rush. Keep building your strength. Do your strength training. It's really important you do your strength training. You're not going to get your invert if you're not strong enough without doing it. Okay, but in between that, do some dancing, do some leg grips, do some upright tricks. There's so much we can explore in pole. If you're running out of things to do and you're just so focused on your inverts, all you're going to really do is piss yourself off, get yourself upset, compare yourself to other people. There's so much magic in pole that goes way beyond inverting, okay? Be kind to yourself. Okay, hopefully that has given you everything you need to start getting upside down. As always, if you're a member, I am here to help, so pop me a message and I would do my best to give you any information that you need. And don't forget to train smarter, not harder.